It's Spoilerin time. This is a show built on another show. There's a show called Cordkillers where we figure out how to watch TV and movies in the most efficient manner to get what we want, when we want, and all that stuff. And then we watch it and we talk about it right here on Spoilerin time. This week, we're going to talk about episodes 2 and 3 of season 2 of The Larry Sanders Show. We're going to talk about episode 10 of season 4 of Mr. Robot, the penultimate episode of Watchmen, episode 8 of season 1, The Mandalorian season 1, episode 5, and Rick and Morty, episode 4, season 4. I'm Tom Merritt, and that man, my friends, is Brian Brushwood.
Doggone right. And as always, we got to check in on our silly fantasy movie draft league.
You mean our very serious and accurate at evaluating talent?
That's right. I'll tell you what, man, Tom Merritt, here you are with $506 million. You only have 2 more movies coming out. Black Christmas, which has been marketed for 6 months straight and from Blumhouse, which brings us a lot of surprise hits, and Cats, which is based on the award-winning, longest-running Broadway musical in all of history. But, ooh, I bet you were real nervous about John Teasdale in second place with $420 million up until you heard what his last movie, Playmobil, did in its box office release.
Yeah, man. Pretty crazy. I was assuming like Frozen 2 is a money machine. It's just going to keep cranking out those bills. And if Playmobil surprises, I could start to get a little nervous because then I'd have to make sure that Cats did well and all that. But honestly, I'm probably more worried about Star Wars anyway. But gosh, I'm not even worried about John Teasdale, or I'm sorry, John Teasdale, but Playmobil, the movie, making $600,000 in 2,000 plus theaters.
In wide release, $600,000 in wide release.
I joked about this before we started recording this episode, but can I read you a quote from STX, the distributor of the film? Major exhibitors and regional chains were supportive about using a date traditionally not programmed with new first-run movies and offering special variable pricing of $5 a ticket. They sold these at a discount, and they still couldn't get anyone to see them.
They papered the audience, and still nobody showed up.
That's like a story all on its own. But so now I feel like, when I was feeling a tiny bit of heat last week, when I'm like, I don't know, Playmobil, maybe no, it's not even worried. Black Christmas, Cats. Jenny Josephson has Jumanji: The Next Level, which is going to do very well, but she's far enough back that I don't feel like that's a threat.
Tom, I finally watched the trailer for Jumanji: The Next Level, and it seems like they said, what are all the things that people loved about the first one? How do we undercut all of those things, but then also give them to them anyway, and also give all of it away in the trailer? I mean,
you're talking about your own personal reaction to it, Brian. None of those things you say really impact box office, do they?
Yes, insofar as so if you want to have a sequel do better than the original, you tell a fundamentally different story. For example, look at Alien to Aliens. Alien was a horror movie with a MacGuffin alien running around. Aliens was a war movie that set in a sci-fi universe that happened to be the same. That's a way you get to do a sequel and do something fundamentally different and still win. In this case, when you try to do the same thing that you did before, but also change stuff up, and specifically you have characters playing different characters because, spoiler alert, you have, everybody is an avatar in a video game. It didn't look, it was a dicey proposition, and I don't think it's going to pay off. We'll see.
$40 to $60 million opening is what they're projecting. So I think Jumanji's going to bring in some money for Jenny Josephson. It combined with Bombshell are not going to be enough to catch me. So it kind of doesn't matter whether you're right or not. I don't think it's going to catch me even in its best projection. Star Wars:
the real
Rise
threat
of Skywalker
will be Star Wars.
Took the words literally right out of my mouth. Like that's all. That is all I'm worried about, and I'm worried. Listen, if I end up second place, I feel like this has vindicated my newer strategy, my refined strategy that I won the summer, the harder of the 2 movie drafts, and got close to the final Star Wars movie. If I end up winning this, I think that's ridiculous. If I end up beating Star Wars with Cats, I don't know. It's going to feel weird.
I'm telling you, everybody's undervaluing Cats. I think Cats may
I
be
agree.
one of the best buys.
I agree. Yeah. All right, folks. Let's move on to talk about Rick and Morty. It was an episode of Rick and Morty where Rick and Morty did things that
it didn't
really stick in my head.
Same here. As a matter of fact, I think I mostly remember how it ended. I know I remember very much how it began. It began with an adventure involving dragons in a fantasy setting, and I remember it involving a cat that talked. And I remember about 10 minutes in deciding, oh my gosh, my kid, my 15-year-old loves dragons and loves cats. And I'm trying to get her into Rick and Morty. I'm going to make her watch this episode. And then 16 minutes into the episode, I was like, nope, no, I won't. She'll never see this episode as long as I live. Because this is some super gross, transgressive humor that's happening. And also, it's an unmitigated screed against fantasy writing. And of course, Dan Harmon even voices the Dungeon Master Wizard, that he's the one who wrote the script, that making fun of the entire genre for how easy and lazy the entire thing is.
I mean, that didn't turn me off. I didn't mind them skewering fantasy. That can be fun. And if they're not being unfair about it, it is fun. And I thought they were perfectly fair. All the things they skewered are problems with fantasy. And Rick and Morty always take things, to 110%. I didn't mind the transgressive humor. That can be funny. And especially in Rick and Morty, they do it really well. And I'm like, okay, some of those things had me snickering too. But in the end, I never felt like they did anything, and this is chasing the high, right? I never felt like they did anything that really got me going, wow, they've topped themselves again. And you can't expect them to do that every week. It's perfectly solid Rick and Morty episode, right?
And I think this is part of the genius of that very first episode where they called this exact shot. Some classic stuff, some amazing new, narrative arc that's going to happen. I can't fault them for anything on it. I thought it was a fine episode, but you're right. It was just another one in the bank.
Yeah. So and that's fine. We can accept that. What about the Mandalorian? Let's move along to the Mandalorian, where I'm very curious how the first real reference to the original movies, granted we have a baby Yoda, but it's not actually Yoda. We went to Tatooine. How'd you feel about that?
If you told me before this began that there would be a baby Yoda and I would love it because of the baby Yoda, would not believe you. If you told me that we're going to go to Tatooine and we're going to spend some time in the Mos Eisley Cantina, and I unironically would say out loud to my family, oh, that's the table that Greedo shouted malarkey at, or what is it?
McClunky.
Malarkey. That was Joe Biden.
I would not believe it. Didn't mind any of the tie-ins. I did mind the predictability and the in-the-bottle nature of this particular episode. Loved seeing Amy Sedaris dressed as Ripley. Wished she had a more interesting narrative arc than a person who runs mechanic loves baby.
And I'll expand on my feelings on Tatooine, but the portions that I didn't love were like, I don't know, drag it out to Beggar's Canyon. I was like, well, poor Amy Sedaris. Why'd they have to give her that line? That line kind of clunked for me.
Yeah, I didn't. I've not hated anything in The Mandalorian, but it earned so much credit in the first 2.5 episodes that I do feel on the second 2.5 episodes that we're a little bit kind of coasting here. We going somewhere? What's going on?
Yeah, I liked this bottle episode. I like the fact that the Man in Black fled across the desert and the Mandalorian pursued him. And it is called the Gunslinger. So I dug that aspect of it. What I think is going to happen is we've got 8 episodes. We had essentially a trilogy to start us off, right? There was the arc of him, searching, finding, returning, and then rescuing the baby, the child. And then we had a bottle episode on one planet with a community that was a remaking of Seven Samurai. And then we had a bottle episode on Tatooine, which was, sort of a gunslinger called the Gunslinger. And I think we'll probably finish with another 3-episode arc. and then these won't feel as unsatisfying as they are now. But because what these are is getting us to the point and setting pieces for that last trilogy of episodes. I bet that's what I think.
I agree. I think that overall, this arc of episodes, the job is to show some time in the wilds, being hunted by all of the bounty hunters, being a marked man and all that stuff. It's meant to build up a little bit of pain and to make us understand why he might possibly compromise in order to get back to normal. We'll see where that goes. In the meantime, I don't want to ding it for being a weekly serial Western, because that's what we loved about it. But just the last couple of episodes have been a bit more on the nose than I would dig. But again, I'll tell you, the greatest gift Disney Plus has given to me and my family is refusing to allow this to be a bingeable thing, and instead crafting a reason every Friday for our whole family to gather together, which is something that I don't know that we've had in my lifetime since I was a kid.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, getting back to Tatooine, I want to give a shout out that I loved that they went to Tatooine and it was just a place where the Mandalorian had some stuff to do.
Yes.
They didn't, other than the Beggar's Canyon, which kind of, that's why that one stuck out to me. There was just like, yeah, I mean, it's the Outer Rim. You end up at Tatooine sometimes. And after the end of the Empire, when, we killed all the local stormtroopers and put their helmets on sticks, there's not much going on because Jabba's dead. So we don't get a lot of Empire trade. We don't get a lot of Jabba trade. Things are a lot quieter, to the point we actually had to hire droids in the Mos Eisley Cantina. Who would have thought they'd ever see the day? But here you are. Like it just felt like an evolution of a place rather than a reference, if you know what I mean.
To be honest, the way The Mandalorian handled Tatooine is the way that I had deeply hoped the prequels were going to do it, where it's like you couldn't believe that this amazing other story happened in the same place as the other thing. And in that regard, the Mandalorian handles it very, very well. Also, this is the fanboy in me, bit of irony that there's no living bartender who would refuse access to droids into the cantina, and now it's run by a droid. I thought that was a little bit, it was understated, but on the nose.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. All right, let's move on to Watchmen, where we get the story of Dr. Manhattan. And where he was, what's been going on. We left the last episode with her pulling the symbol, the ring, out of his forehead, and this was, I thought nicely told, weaving a flashback story being told with other flash forwards and flashbacks that are all a flashback to tell how we got to this point. And then the last 10 minutes or so, we pick up the story where we left off, and turns out that when Dr. Manhattan can experience all presences at once, it doesn't mean he can avoid his fate, apparently.
Yeah, how can I put this? To somebody out there, this is a mind-blowing experience. And whoever that person is, they've never read Slaughterhouse-5. If you've read Slaughterhouse-5, you kind of already get it. And so I know that for me, I just instantly sort of accepted like, oh, I get what they're doing. I think it's great. The timeline, future, past, or whatever, it's like looking at the horizon and seeing peaks and valleys or whatever. You can't affect it, but you can see it, and you still have to go through it. And of course, the whole thing is a metaphor for where we time travel in our minds as we imagine our past or imagine our future or remember our past or whatever. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about them, number one, hiding Dr. Manhattan's face from us, and then having him bravely or proudly show off his adopted new face once he reassumes his identity.
It felt a little bit like saving salary, didn't it?
Right?
Like, oh, we didn't have to pay a second actor, so yeah.
Yeah. Although I did very much enjoy the young Ozymandias Veidt stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I got to tell you, Tom, separate issue here. We had Justin on the show. in the back of my mind, I just can't stop thinking about how much he must be hating all of this. And I asked him today because I don't want to provoke him because he's quick to rage about this because he loves this property more than anybody I know. And he said, look, it's fine fan fiction. I'm glad that fan fiction for Watchmen has a home and it happens to be on HBO. And to be honest, I thought that was actually a wise thing to say because like, that's what I perceive all of this as is, you know, none of us would know what an official sequel would look like, but this is fine fan fiction. I'm loving every second
David Lindelof
this.
is a fan, and he has at his disposal all the resources of his experience and HBO to tell great fan fiction. Like, okay, I'm fine with that too.
I'm still really enjoying it, but I tried to conduct an objective experiment by having my wife, I told her just to watch the first 5 minutes. She ended up watching the entire show, and I was just like, you could leave at any point. Don't worry about it. I'm watching this or whatever. She didn't love it either. And so I'm wondering, I don't know. And I know Bryce tapped out saying you'll binge the whole thing at once down the road, right?
Yeah, once it's done, which I guess next week is the season finale, I'll give it a shot probably over the holiday break and just start fresh from the very beginning because I'm not a Watchmen. I already am not catching the Watchmen stuff that's in there, the references, and I'm bumping up against it every week. So at least I can binge it and see what is locally contained in there without all the Watchmen references. You know?
I deeply loved this episode that they tied together a very human thing, courtship, with a supernatural being who knows how everything turns out. That was fun, you know, wordplay forward and backwards. Where are we? And all that. Also, I'm a goofball. I love the fact that the episode is titled "A God Walks into a Bar," but when the text appears on screen, it says a God walks into. They remove the space between A and bar, so it says A bar, which of course Angela Abar is our hero that we're following, and we watch the courtship of Angela Abar. I don't know, maybe I'm just a goofball sucker for all that stuff. I liked all that.
Well, to me, it's all about resistance and acceptance. If you're resisting this because you've already decided you don't like what they're going with it, you're going to hate that kind of thing, right? Like, oh, and then they did that stupid thing with A bar. Like, you know, like if you're accepting it and being like, no, I'm enjoying this. This is fun. I'm going to look for things to enjoy. Then you dig that. You're like, oh, that was clever, right? It's all a matter of your sentiment and where your head's at with this sort of thing. I tend these days to judge whether I'm actually liking something in a sort of objective way by do I think about it outside to the point where Game of Thrones, when it was in its 5th, 6th, and even 7th season, I would think about it and I would watch it again before the next episode because I was so excited to watch the next episode. Watchmen, I don't give a second thought once it to, you know, other than talking about it here until it's 6:00 on Sunday. And then I'm like, oh, Watchmen. And I don't have a resistance to it. I don't think, oh, I have to watch Watchmen. I'm like, oh, Watchmen, that'll be fun. But I don't think about it outside of its time. So it's not quite reaching that level where I'm like, okay, let me ponder what that meant. I sort of forget about it between viewings.
Yeah, I think we went through a version of this when we watched The Leftovers, where I think Lindelof has a very, very good talent for world building and giving me a world that lets me. I think he's strong on character, strong on world building. You could say weak on narrative. You know, he relies, to Justin's chagrin, a bit too much on the mystery box formula to engage folks on the narrative side. But I every Sunday night, I have a choice of whether I'm going to watch this or Mr. Robot, and it's not even close. I'm diving straight in to Watchmen. I'm having a great time.
All right. Anything else on Watchmen before we talk about Mr. Robot?
No. Outside of to say, I do like to Bryce's point about all the questions he had at the beginning or any of them being answered. You get to see the moment where Dr. Manhattan describes the place on Europa that he's built, and you get to see Veidt leap at the opportunity to go there. and which explains the fact that, a few episodes in, he's talking about how he thought this was a paradise, but realized it's a prison, and wants out, that kind of thing.
And even that makes it tough because I don't know who Vite is or Dr. Manhattan, like outside of the show or what those names mean.
Yeah.
That's
So
it's called Watchmen. People should probably should know something about it. I don't know.
But you don't need to. You know that Vite did something. And you know that now Vite and Dr. Manhattan were contemporaries. And in the conversation in this week's episode, Vite talks about what he did, and Dr. Manhattan talks about what he did to stop him. Like they're slowly revealing that. So if you don't know the source material, it's another mystery that is slowly being unveiled.
You know what might be
that's kind of cool.
What might be fun? I don't know if your schedule permits, Bryce, but it might be fun as we go into the last episode of the season for you to watch the Zack Snyder movie, which is, and we've talked about this before, for people who have never read the comic, they generally thought it was too heady or whatever. But for people who had read the comic, in general, they loved how much of the comic made it in there. I don't know. If you have it in you to watch the movie and then get caught up, I think that might be really interesting to hear what that's like on the other side of that.
I may not have the time to do that before, say, next week's recording, but I'll try. Maybe that's what I'll do over the holidays when we've got a few weeks off. Try to.
So you would have a truly interesting experience because you would start in the quote unquote current timeline, jump back in the past for a backfill on story prequel, then jump in and get the bonus multiplier of all the binging from just going straight through everything on there.
Though I will say that's Justin rewatched the movie and reread the books before the season, right before the season started. So
yeah, but
Justin also has a whole other history with Watchmen that you don't.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I don't think it was the watching that caused his reaction.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Mr. Robot. This was the Darlene Dom episode. We get to find out that Dom is okay. They did some surgery. They saved her life. The FBI is investigating her. They appreciate her coming forth and being honest, but she's still now, suspended because of all the things that she apparently has admitted to them. And Darlene comes to her apartment after Dom forces her way out of the hospital to be home and says, "You can't stay here. The Dark Army's coming after you. So we have to get the F out of Dodge." And they drive up to Boston to get away from observation, and fake passports and tickets allow them to potentially board a plane to Budapest. And that's really where the only drama to me in this episode comes. I mean, there's a little bit when Darlene's trying to talk her into leaving, but it's mostly that drama of Dom running into Bobby Cannavale's character and finding out that, at least according to him, the Dark Army isn't after her, meaning she could go back to her family. She wouldn't have to flee. And Darlene having a panic attack and deciding that no, she should stay with Dom. And then of course we have the Gift of the Magi incident where Dom decides at the last minute, well, wait a minute, I should go with Darlene. She's the family I choose, and gets on the plane even though Darlene's not on it.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Tom. The most revolutionary part of this episode was how right I was about how F Society was going to realize that rather than breaking the monetary system, they should give all the money to all the other people. I agree. Thank you for pointing out that I was 100% right in my prediction last week.
Did that happen? I've forgotten that part. I guess it was
Wait,
important.
what?
No,
they're sitting in Central Park.
they were in Central Park. They were in the rest stop, weren't they?
Yeah, they were at a dam near Boston.
Oh, got it. Boston.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
on
right.
the road.
Logan.
But yes. But that wasn't drama. That was expected because you had told us about it.
Look, sorry, this is me doing
He's doing a victory lap.
I apologize.
Anything you said so far.
But I will say, I thought this was an extraordinarily sweet story, especially because they, and forgive me if I'm misremembering, but when Dom sorry, what's
Darlene?
Darlene.
What's that?
Darlene.
Dom and so it seemed like Darlene was fairly mercenary in her seduction of Dom in order to get access to stuff or whatever. I think my favorite part about all this was how not an issue the same sexness of the relationship was. It was really sweet. I thought that after the heady, we did it, we stole all the money from everyone and we doxed them, I think having a very small story was exactly right for me, and keeping it small. It was just about feelings. I really enjoyed that.
And to the point of your very correct prediction, Brian, I loved that we had Elliot believably say, like, now this is your win. I still have work to do, because we all know there's a finale coming, right? So there's something else Elliot has to confront on a bigger stage, and letting Darlene have that moment, that quiet moment where she's like, Dom, shut up, just watch. Like, you don't know what I just did. I thought that was beautiful.
And it was an episode of a lot of like setting up and then subverting expectations, right? I mean, they go on this big long road trip, and then they sit out in the open, and you think, oh, maybe something's going to happen there. They go into the airport, and you see Bobby Cannavale, and you think, oh, maybe Dom is hallucinating, or he's going to do something to her.
Yeah.
Even
I'm still not 100% certain that he wasn't like, I can't come at you at the airport, but I can try to convince you not to leave so that we can come at you somewhere else.
But I am mostly convinced that it's exactly what it seems like. I think they were letting the air out of the tires on that stuff. I think that if one of the best examples that stuck in my mind is in the video game Half-Life 2. There's you begin, the first act is you got to escape a thing, and it's very high intensity adrenaline. You finally make it, and then they hand you this special gun that allows you to control gravity or whatever. And they give you a good 15 minutes where there's a robot dog called Dog, and all you're doing is practicing how to use this magical gravity gun. But really what you're doing is you're having a quiet moment playing fetch with the dog to let your adrenaline get out of your system. This is what I felt like this episode was. Everything was like, let's let it all out. Let's acknowledge that we did it. We won. We did good. You hung in there, and now we can all relax, which is where you have to be going into the next episode if they're going to tweak that adrenaline engine again.
And it still managed to have a lot of tension, right? I mean, with Dom and Darlene at that sort of last moment where they're together, and Dom's like, no, I'm not going to. And then Carly Rae Jepsen's Run Away With Me starts playing in the background, which by
the way, Eileen immediately goes, was that really in 2015? Oh yeah, it was.
And it feels like this very like, oh, this is a very obvious music cue. It's called Run Away With Me, whatever. And so you think, oh, well, maybe it's ironic and she's leaving, and then it fades out. And then it comes back and she's running through the airport, and you're like, oh, they're okay, so they're really going to do this. Like, I had already made peace with this. And then the gift of the Magi moment happens, and they just happen to miss each other. I think that there was still a lot of good tension here for something that is like a nice sort of calm story.
There was genuine tension, but it was low stakes tension. Like in that way where you're just sort of like, oh golly, I hope those two make it work. And even then, like, you're not left with an expectation they're going to live forever together.
Yeah.
It's just like, seems like you two might get along.
Because it's sad, right? It's sad once they miss each other and the plane takes off. But there's something about just seeing that shot of Dom in the seat with the book open, and she's sleeping really peacefully. Where you're like,
and
okay.
We've heard her talk multiple times this episode about how she doesn't sleep.
And that lets off, it doesn't feel sad. It feels just like,
well,
you wake up from a sleep.
You feel like this is the type of story.
Brian, to your point, I think what happened was we needed Darlene to stick around for other stuff. We still need her. And so we wanted to end Dom's story. And the peaceful way we ended Dom's story was convincing her to do something for herself for once and just go to effing Budapest. And even if that meant her deciding, you know what? No, I want to be with Darlene. Then getting on the plane and being panicked that Darlene is not there, and then accepting it and saying, oh, F it. You know what? I'm just going to go to Budapest, and now I can finally sleep because I've accepted my fate. That's the way I'm taking it.
Yeah.
Whereas Darlene is left dangling because we still need her in Elliot's story for some reason, I bet.
Me too. I'm left with this sense that, like, oh, won't this be a wacky story 2 years from now? Because you have the sense that they're immediately going to resolve it the first time they get on the phone with each other.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Oh, I came back for you. Oh, I did too. How did we not miss each other?
Just wait another 18 hours. I will buy another ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll meet up there.
So again, low stakes, real tension, exactly what we needed to sort of have a moment to breathe going into what I assume is, what do we got? 2 or 3 more episodes?
We have 2 more weeks, but the last week is like a double episode. It's like a 2-part thing that they're airing on one.
So I'm going to guess that we're looking at an hour-long setup to real tension and then a spectacular 2-hour finale.
Yeah.
All right, folks, let's talk about Larry Sanders, both The List and The Stalker.
So The List of the two I thought was less interesting to me. I thought it was fine that they ended up with let's tear up the list. Really what they're doing is they're just firmly establishing, hey, we're getting into real relationship stuff. This ex-wife is here to stay. This is the new main story on the relationship front.
We left Janine, what was her name? The previous wife. That actress left the show, so the new love interest is Francine. So let's make sure that's established, and this worked for that.
Well, and I think hat tip to the first episode, they do a good job of sort of setting her up as a scary, terrifying monster where everybody in Larry's life is like, oh no, not her. And then, this is the episode where they sort of roll that back and instead introduce her as a human being and there are complications of the relationship, which parts are his fault, which parts are her fault. And she talks about, how she slept with all these people 6 years ago just to hurt him. And real bummer that it's only now that they're getting back together that he's finding out about all of this.
Yeah. Oh, I actually really like that line where she's like, but I never found out if you were hurt. Were you hurt? I need you to tell me you're hurt.
And he's like, yes, I'm hurt right now. I'm very hurt.
She's like, okay, good.
Like, great.
We can move on now. Yeah.
I much more enjoyed the Stalker episode because I thought it was really interesting, that duality, and where on the one hand, the stalkeriness is a artifact of sort of an imbalance of attention where somebody perceives you as something bigger than you actually are and feels an outsized entitlement to your attention and so on, which to a very, very small degree is something that you and I, Tom, can relate to.
Sure.
But also the flip side of that is the hunger on behalf of the celebrity, understanding that people wanting to hang out with you is kind of how you make your living. And I thought it was
the Corbin Burnson thing was hilarious.
Well, because he's right, because there are you and I have both encountered fans who are very, very passionate, and a good way, what you want to do is direct that energy into something positive instead of negative, right? And so as we build out Modern Rogue World headquarters, we don't make a big deal of where we are, but we're not ready to receive guests. So we try to direct that energy in ways that don't make people feel like they need to hop in a car and drive a very far way to show up here because we're not ready to host anybody yet. So I thought Corbin Burnson was 100% right. And it was awesome to see that totally perverted and subverted with how everything turned out.
Also, the Phil Hartman, almost heartbreaking to see him just being hilariously an asshole to Corbin Burnson.
Yeah.
It was pretty great.
I mean, you could tell it's two actors who are already friendly portraying two actors who are already friendly, which makes it all the more heartbreaking that we lost Phil.
This is probably the most Curb Your Enthusiasm Larry Sanders, and we've talked about the parallels between them. This could easily have been a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode, I think.
It did lean quite a bit into the awkward assumptions, both with the moment that he confronts the Prowler and then has to reveal that to Hank. Like the moment he says, the guy didn't know who I was, he was just there to steal the stereo. And then Hank's immediate response is, I'm so sorry. Like it was, I mean, there was plenty there. I as far as just an all-in-one episode, I thought it was among the best I've seen so far.
And still a joy to be dipping into Larry Sanders' show as we go along. So thank you all for going along with us. Of course, patreon.com/Cordkillers to get these episodes earlier in the week and to just support our efforts here. If you think you're getting some value out of this, we'd like a little of that value back. Patreon.com/Cordkillers. We'll spoil you again next week.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.